Rob, let me ask you this, though. There were calls online from folks on the right that said, that's it, we should be done with CBS, okay? And I've heard this before, right? It's the same people who say, I'm tired of the mainstream media, and then go hang out at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Like, either stand on principle and be a big person, or just pretend, be a hypocrite. That's fine. I don't care, but you can't have it both ways. Should Republicans, let me just kind of give you my take on this. And then I think that until we stand on principle and say, we're not going on your networks, we're not going to add credibility to you, right? Then it's all of it just a meaningless threat, because if they know that at the end of the day, we're going to go on CBS Evening News and face the nation with Margaret Brennan, who hosted that, then it doesn't mean anything until we start saying, no, I'm not going on your network, because they get away with it. They don't go on Fox. They get to push out the Daily Signal out of the briefing room and take the credential away. No one says a damn thing, but our side always goes, okay, well, it's ABC and we want to go to their party.
Well, Sean, it's absolutely correct. And I applaud Donald Trump for saying no to 60 Minutes for that precise reason. Yep. Why should he sit there and subject himself to that type of treatment when he knows exactly what's coming his way? I thought that this year we might see some change with the Commission on Presidential Debates finally exiting the stage and maybe opening up a new pathway. The problem is, as you identified it, Kamala Harris wouldn't agree to a debate on Fox News. Remember, Donald Trump proposed those 3 debates. She was the one that wouldn't agree to the terms. She wants it only in those friendly settings where she knows exactly what the topics are going to be, as you articulated. I think we need an entirely new model going forward. Obviously, you had a hand in this back when you were running the show in 2016 in terms of how Republicans handled things in the primary. I think if we could go to a model where so many of these establishment legacy organizations, which, by the way, have no trust or credibility with the American people anyways, so let's go to a system where people who, are influencers in some other realm can be asking the questions, or let's take the moderators out of it entirely so there's no
timekeeper.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's my point. Pick a venue.
Put them in front of voters and let the voters ask the question.
Right. Have a stage and say, here, you have an hour and a half, go. We don't, and by the way, it's open feed. Everybody would cover it. This is not that hard. And I think that, here's my point. After the election, I think if one party puts out a proposal and says, here's what we propose for the future, and starts laying the groundwork, that could possibly work. I want to ask you guys real quick, though, around the horn. I want everyone, what was an issue that you were disappointed didn't come up? Is there an issue that you thought, wow, I actually, or a topic that didn't come up that you thought might? Seth, was there something? I mean, you really know the economy and that. Is there somewhere in that realm, maybe something else? But I just think, is there somewhere you said, I'm surprised they didn't ask about?
They really didn't hit on tariffs and China.
Yes.
And I was waiting for that because I thought JD brought it up. But nobody ever talks about tariffs as a national security component. I mean, UBS just did a recent report that said if Trump were to reinstate the tariffs and do what he's talking about, it would shrink China's economy by 2.5 percentage points. That is massive. We didn't win the Cold War because we dropped a bomb. We won the Cold War because of economic pressures on Russia and communism. And that's effectively, I think, is not talked about enough. And I think JD Vance could have handled that. I was hoping we would hear more about China as our primary adversary, both economically and potentially geopolitically, and that just wasn't talked about.
Rob Bluey, is there anything that came to you? I agree. China to me was a big one. There's a bunch of economic issues. What else do you think got missed?
Well, China did come up, but only in the context of challenging Tim Walz's false statement that he was there for the Tiananmen Square massacre.
Look, lots of people get confused if they weren't in Tiananmen Square in 1989. Seriously, how many times have you been walking down the street and you go, wait a second, was I just in Tiananmen Square during a massive uprising? Because I swear that's where I was. But now that you bring it up, you're right, I wasn't there. I mean, I'm just saying, let's give the guy a little slack because lots of people confuse being in Minnesota. Have you ever been in Minneapolis or the Mall of America? I can see how that's confusing.
On that point, though, Sean, I would say the thing that I was most disappointed, I was glad that they brought up at least one instance of Tim Walz lying, but there were so many other things that they could have potentially asked about. The stolen valor controversy, misstatements that he's made as the governor of Minnesota. I mean, you could have gone down the list.
Yeah.
And I think that would have told the American people a little bit more about him. And it would have given him an opportunity, by the way, to respond. I would imagine that was probably part of his debate prep.
Oh, it had to be. I mean, he not just has a stolen valor issue and a history of lying that didn't come up, Grace, but he lied about immigration, and they didn't fact check him on this. There's a chart that came out about crossings, right? That was true. I mean, he misstated that. He got caught lying on that. It was amazing what he got away with.
Yeah, I will say, though, that I think the Tiananmen Square question, it was kind of like, all of his lies are pretty similar in the sense that they're meant to make him look better or embellish his resume. And so that one for me, I didn't need to hear every single one, because I agree with you, Sean, about what you said in the beginning, where a lot of people don't care that much and you can kind of get in the weeds. And I thought that his response to the Tiananmen Square was probably exactly what he would have responded to the stolen valor claim. It was like, I'm a knucklehead. I say things wrong. And it was so uncomfortable. I was watching in my bed, and it was so uncomfortable that I took the covers and I just like pulled them up over my face, because I was like, oh, I don't know if I can do like 5 more questions of this. I will say one thing I wish had been brought up, and I wish the media would spend more attention on, is the attempted assassinations on Donald J. Trump. I mean, we act like this was 7 years ago. This is all very recent. And I would like for Tim Walz to explain how his party continues to accuse the right of, violent political rhetoric and continues to demonize this person, but doesn't seem to slow down when it comes to their own violent political rhetoric. Like, how about you take a little bit of accountability? If it were reversed, and I'm glad it's not, and I never want anyone to be hurt, but if it were reversed, we would be answering questions about that at every single possible forum.
Yeah, I would just add, by the way, I think the China one is huge. I think the idea that there were 2 veterans and no one talked about veterans, and that there was no discussion about the military and our preparation. I mean, that could have national security. I got a couple more things I want to hit, because there's some new definitions in the dictionary that I want to touch on. But there's a story that came out, Seth, yesterday in the Daily Mail about Kamala Harris's husband, Doug Emhoff. And it says, quote, he forcefully slapped ex-girlfriend for flirting with another man in booze-fueled assault. This is a guy who is, quote, redefining toxic masculinity, who is showing what it's like to be a real man. And there are serious allegations now. I mean, obviously, this is a guy who hooked up with the nanny, got her pregnant, and now we're hearing about this story as well. And yet, outside of the Daily Mail, nobody's covering it. And I think, look, she's the one. I have always said families are off limit. But if you bring your family into the campaign and want to make him a centerpiece by saying he's the new definition of masculinity and he's got a history of hitting women, I don't know that that's something that should get a pass. And I'm sort of amazed that outside of the Daily Mail, no one has covered this. And I'm not saying he's guilty or he's not guilty, but there's clearly people that could substantiate this or corroborate it. And I don't feel like it's not popping up anywhere. And he has a history now of lying, because we saw that this issue with the nanny getting her pregnant with his first wife wasn't something they included on their vetting report, that when she was first up for vice president.
Yeah, I think if Jen Psaki, and I think Jen Psaki was the one that said that he was redefining masculinity, right? And is that redefining it as what was Ike Turner? I mean, what are we doing? But to your point, I'm not surprised that nobody's covering it, Sean. Haven't we learned they're not going to cover anything that could be potentially negative or damning to Kamala Harris or the Democrats? And so they're not going to ask a question. Imagine if this was Don Jr. Or, I mean, it would be plastered across. We would have everybody, but we should have learned based on the Hunter Biden stuff that they're just not going to touch this.
Yeah.
They're not going to go anywhere near it.
All right, this is a guy. All right, Grace, every year the dictionary, Merriam-Webster, comes out with new definitions. I want to get to a few of them because you may actually school me on some of them. But before that, the big one that I thought was fascinating is, no kidding, it finally caught up. We've now changed the definition of a female. So it is now saying that female is having a gender identity opposite the male, which, okay, so it sort of like now becomes this like circle where it's like what's a male? Well, a male is opposite of female. That's what it. So you've now created a situation where you can't define anything because it's the opposite of the other thing that we can't define. So according to the dictionary, having a gender identity, not chromosomes, not science, not the ability to have a baby, not any of the scientific definitions, but it's having a gender identity, key word there, that's opposite the male.
But then doesn't the question become, well, what's a man? And then that.
But that's right. And that's why I'm saying the new definition of a man is having a gender identity opposite of female. So it starts, it's a vicious, like, so the answer is it means nothing anymore. The word means nothing because it's the opposite of the other thing.
Yeah,
so what is black? Black is not white. What is white? Not black.
I mean, it's 1984. What's the quote? It's a beautiful thing, the destruction of words. Like when you control the language, you control the masses. And if people don't understand, and this is really a big part of the Democrat agenda, which I'm sure Rob and Seth can speak to more than I can, but it's like having the vagueness is the point. Confusing people is the point, because then you can always win these arguments when there are no definitions and nobody knows what we're really talking about. People get confused, and then you can control the conversation and you can control the argument. So I definitely think this is purposeful. It's unfortunate that it's happening. But we saw this in the Supreme Court. Ketanji Brown Jackson, she said, I'm not a biologist. So maybe the people at Merriam-Webster or whatever dictionary we're using here, they're not biologists. And so they don't feel comfortable putting out that definition. But I fear for the future. I fear for people who are actually, like, we all have knowledge from the before times where you could actually define these things. Some people, this is their life. They're going to be confused forever.
I don't know. I'm mind blown by this because they went out of their way now to create further confusion. I mean, I don't know about you guys, Seth or Rob. When I was a kid, right, I wouldn't know a word. I'd go up. My parents would say, go look it up. I'd grab the dictionary, I'd look it up. And now if I'm a kid, I'm like, wait, so what is this? Like, and I, to Grace's point, I mean, you're right. As soon as you control the words and the dialogue, you control everything.
What's the greatest line? What's that line? The greatest lie the devil ever told was convincing people he didn't exist.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of the same thing here. It's the greatest maneuver for the left and the far progressives that want to change everything about human culture and normalcy. Is to convince things that there is no normalcy. Right. And I think that's what we're seeing play out right here.
Yeah.
Sean, one of the best things that we could probably all do is go buy paper copies of dictionaries that are on the shelf now or printed 5-10 years ago, because they will be radically different for the future generation of this country. We've seen this trend already. We talked about media bias. Look at the Associated Press style book, which is essentially the Bible that all of the reporters use for the language that they put in their stories. And the AP has gone completely woke and adopted all of these left-wing ideas. So it's really sad that we're heading down this path.
I'm going to pull the dictionary, my kids are going to be like, all right, kids, this is a dictionary. This is when a woman was actually defined by her chromosomes. Ha, ha, ha. And they're going to be like, Dad, go sit down. But
you're going to say, be quiet, Grandpa.
Yeah, be quiet, Grandpa. You and those words. All right, it's Thursday. We wrap up with our winners and losers. Grace, who do you have as your winner and loser?
Okay, so my winner, it would be easy for me, especially because you chose me first, to say J.D. Vance, and I think that he is a winner. But I'm actually going to say Donald Trump Jr., who we brought up today.
Oh!
Donald Trump Jr. was getting plenty of press when Donald Trump picked J.D. Vance. Yeah. People were saying, he must be really mad at DJT Jr. because he was a big Vance guy, and people are wondering why Trump listened to his son because this was a horrible pick. And he was he was able to take such a victory lap, so much vindication.
I know. You're right, though.
He's loving it.
All right,
so
who's your loser?
My loser is Doug Emhoff or Jen Psaki, because like Seth said, I mean, the timing of that interview of, fawning over him as this pinnacle of masculinity, only for days later for these tabloid stories to come out. He's a big time loser today.
Good call. Seth Denson, winner and loser.
Winner is the American people. They got to see an articulate debate that didn't go into name calling or yelling or any of that. And they saw effectively a vice presidential candidate put the moderators in their place when he knew they needed to. And so I'll go and give you my loser, which were those moderators. CBS News had an opportunity to say, we are not what they say we are in the mainstream media. They failed.
Excellent. All right, Rob Bluey.
Okay, my winner is Scott Pressler, who's doing some great work in Pennsylvania. Sean, I was up there in Bucks County a few weeks ago seeing the ground game. They have flipped the voter registration from a Democrat to Republican in, I think, well over 60.
We're going over those numbers tomorrow. We're going to talk to Michael Whatley tomorrow. I'm so glad you brought up Scott. That's awesome. Yeah. Yep, you're absolutely right.
Pennsylvania's the critical state. Loser, I'm going to pick Taylor Lorenz. She no longer has the Washington Post as her platform.
Oh, so good.
Best wishes to her.
Yeah, she departed, which means she got fired because she lied. By the way, she called Joe Biden a warmonger and then lied about it, got caught lying about it. So they've decided to part ways. All right, my winner, I went easy on this. It's JD Vance, and my loser is Merriam-Webster. I mean, the idea that we're doing this, I think, is a huge, huge loss for society. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.